morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to join you. Before I start my presentation, although my time has already started, I wanted a little bit of audience participation. I want to ask two very, very quick questions. And just by a show of hands, answer my questions. So how many of you at the coffee break would have wanted milk in your tea or coffee? Or how many of you drink milk in your daily lives, or have milk in your coffee, your tea, and your cereal, whatever? So quite a lot of you. Okay, hands down. The next question is a bit unrelated. How many of you have pets at home? You have a cat or a dog or a cow. Does anyone have a cow at home? No one? Okay, so I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, but if you remember nothing from my presentation, remember that. A lot of people drink milk. No one owns cows. My presentation is disruptive business models for the circular economy. And when you get a topic like that, you're expected to present slides that look like that. Light bulbs exploding, matches igniting, and you use words like disruption and transformation and think outside the box. But when it comes to disruption, that's not actually what it looks like. If you ask the top CEOs of the most disruptive brands and companies around the world, they'll tell you that disruption looks a bit more like this. It's stressful. It's difficult. An idea that is disruptive is inherently going to come up against a lot of resistance because you're telling the world to do things differently. You're telling the world to change. So it's very difficult. It requires dedication, it requires passion, it requires resilience, which is why, depending on the studies that you look at, 1 out of 1,000 ideas will make it to market. 999 ideas will fail, and they won't make it to market. So as we looked at disruptive ideas for the circular economy, we said instead of going through all of this and probably failing, why don't we just steal the idea from someone else? So we looked at disruptive companies and disruptive brands, and we asked ourselves, what do they have in common? So these are in different industries. You've got music, you've got transport, data, software, entertainment. They're all in different industries, but they have one thing in common. And the thing that they have in common is, like us, they stole their business idea. Every single one of those brands stole their idea from somebody else. Not only did they steal their idea, but they stole the exact same idea. It's an idea that the first instance we can find of it was in 1906 in San Francisco. There was a guy called G.W. Maxwell who in 1906 realized that, like all of us, Americans like to drink milk. But like all of us, Americans don't like to own cows. They're big, they smell, you have to feed them, you have to look after them. So you want milk, but you don't want to own a cow. So he invented the milk carton. And when he invented the milk carton, he gave us first the opportunity to buy a service instead of owning a product. And that's, we've mentioned it quite a lot in the presentations this morning, the product as a service business model. So what we wanted to do was sort of do a deep dive into this product as a service business model because it has become so easy to provide services instead of products that, forget the circular economy, forget economics, we now live in a society where people don't want things, they want access. They want access to content, they want access to films, they want real-time, immediate, emergency access. They don't want to wait to buy something and figure out how to use it. So what I wanted to do is just tell you 3 very quick stories. One is, why is product as a service better for your customers? Forget circular economy for a little while. If you run a business, if you're not offering services but you're selling products, you will go out of business. Products are becoming irrelevant. So I'll try and prove to you at the end of this that it's better for your consumers and your customers. The second one is, why is it disruptive? Why has every industry that this business model has gone into disrupted that industry? And then the third one is, what does that mean for the circular economy? So if I talk about customer centricity first, the most customer-centric brand on the planet is probably Apple. And everyone shows the exact same case study on how transformative they are and how customer-centric they are. And I'm a massive Apple enthusiast, but I want to show you a very different case study today. I want to show you a case study of when Apple got it wrong. So in 2003, they started iTunes. And they said, you know, instead of buying CDs and vinyl, you can now buy your music online on our store, and that'll revolutionize the music industry. And then they came around in 2011 and said, see, I told you. In 2011, pay-per-track sales, so buying tracks on their store, instead of overtook CDs and vinyl. So they were right. It was a better user experience. Customers preferred that. And that's usually where the case study ends. But if you go a little bit further, in 2017, physical sales overtook paper track sales, which means in 2017, more kids were buying CDs and vinyl than they were buying online and paying per track. So the question is, what happened? What did Apple do between 2011 and 2017 that made that happen? And the answer is, it's not the full story. Because in 2008, someone called Spotify came along and said, if people don't want to own cows, why do they want to own CDs? And they said, I think you should buy music as a service. And that was their only offering. And you can see this is the growth model for most as-a-service businesses anywhere in the world. So this is Spotify's revenue from 2009 to 2016, exponential growth. This is the music market in the US in billions. From 2014, it goes from 4.4 million to 2017, it goes to 7 billion. But you can see all the growth is in that green bar. That green bar is streaming services like Spotify. That green bar is as a service. And then on the right, you can see that in 2017, physical sales made 17% of the market, and digital downloads only 15% of the market. Consumers had told Apple, we don't want to own anything anymore, we want to buy a service. And so Apple then said, well, even us with all of our marketing, with all of our brand, with all of our awareness, with all of our budgets, we can't stand up against this. So they launched Apple Music in 2015. So the reason I use this example is because a lot of you will be engineers or scientists and you like a controlled experiment. This is the only controlled experiment I can find where you have two things on this slide. You have iTunes and Apple Music. It's the exact same product or service. It's the exact same company. It's the exact same brand. It's selling the exact same thing to the exact same people. iTunes is going out of business because they're selling a product. Apple Music is growing exponentially because they're offering it as a service. Customers prefer this business model. Just because customers prefer it doesn't mean it's disruptive. So the question is, why is as a service disruptive? And for that, I want to use a story from a company called Grab. So I believe here you use a lot more Uber, the ride-hailing service. This one is from Grab. The numbers are from Singapore, but they are the same in concept, any company, anywhere in the world. So I did a presentation like this in Singapore. And I worked out to go to from the auditorium afterwards to go and have a drink with some friends of mine would cost me $16 if I drove my car. The reason it cost me $16 is because the car would cost me $10, the petrol would cost me $2, and the parking would cost me $4. These are real data from Singapore. The cost of the car comes from figuring out the total cost of owning a car over its life cycle in Singapore divided by the number of trips it makes. So it's basically cost per trip. Grab came along and said, if people don't want to own cows and people don't want to own CDs, why do they want to own cars? And they offered me this as an alternative. And this, again, is real data. I went onto my Grab and I went from the conference center to the drinking hole at the end, and it was $10. So it's cheaper for me. Now, where does that $10 come from? Depending on where you get your data, the breakdown of your Grab might be slightly different for Uber. The car now is $2. Now, it's the same car at this point. So the question is, why is that $2 instead of 10? And it's just utilization. That car is running 5 more trips versus if I did it myself. Petrol is the same. There's no parking, but you've obviously got to pay the driver, and you give Grab $1. So it's $10. That's better for me. It's cheaper for me. It's a better user experience. But even that isn't really disruptive. Disruption comes because companies like Grab and Uber are now responsible for the largest fleet of vehicles in human history. And when you're responsible for that number of vehicles, you have a tremendous amount of scale. It is all about scale. Therefore, you can justify investing in technology, investing in R&D to bring the cost of your service down. And so if I were to tell you that because of this huge overwhelming pressure to invest in and make their service cheaper so they can compete, they're going to have autonomous electric vehicles, self-driving vehicles in Singapore in the next 3 years. If I told you that, you might not believe me. You might believe this guy, who is their president, who says that by 2022, they'll have autonomous vehicles in Singapore. So the scale unlocked the innovation. So now what does that mean in terms of disruption? Let's run the exact same model The exact same model now, if I have an autonomous electric vehicle, the car is only 50 cents for that trip. Because again, this car can now run 24 hours a day. It doesn't need to sleep, it doesn't need to take days off. Electricity is cheaper than petrol. You don't have a driver at all, so you've just reduced 50% of your cost. And let's say Grab still takes $1. So Grab can still make the money it wants, but it can now offer me that exact same trip for $2 instead of 16. That's disruption. So the first jump is better for the customer, business model innovation. The second jump, because of scale, business model disruption. And you can't compete with that. The journey is more comfortable for me, it's better for me to take that service, and there's no way we're going to be buying cars when that happens. So we said from a circular economy standpoint, it's better if people share. We want people to share because that benefits the circular economy. What I'm showing with this example is, it's not just better for the economy, it's better for the consumers, and it's better for the customers, and it's better for the vendors. There's a business case for doing it. So the third story I have is what's the point? We are a very traditional bricks and mortar business. So I come from a company called Kaer, which is an air conditioning firm. And we sell air conditioning to commercial buildings and industrial buildings like this. And what we would do is for 60 years, we've been going to them and saying, we'll procure chillers for you, we'll procure cooling towers for you, we'll procure control systems for you, we'll put it together and we'll give it to you as a product. And after 60 years, we said, well, if people don't want to own cows, people don't want to own CDs, people don't want to own cars, maybe they don't want to own air conditioning assets either. So we developed air conditioning as a service. And we've been doing it for about 6 or 7 years. So without going into much detail, essentially what we do is we take over all of the things associated with the cow. So the capital investment into the assets, the utilities that it uses, service and maintenance, repairs, compliance, manpower, everything in terms of owning and operating that asset. And the building owner just buys air conditioning as they use, just the same way that they would buy electricity. So you buy electricity for every kilowatt hour you use. You don't invest in power generation, power plants, things like that. You just buy electricity per kilowatt hour. So now you can do the same thing with air conditioning. But there's a real key difference when it comes to the circular economy. Why is this different to Grab, and why is this different to the Spotify example? The difference is you can see this big word here called utilities. About 50% of the energy consumption of buildings in this part of the world is from the air conditioning system. That's now my responsibility, not my customer's responsibility. If we want to move to a circular economy, we need to move the burden of being circular and the burden of being sustainable away from the customers and onto the vendors. Because then there's a business reason to do it. And that's where you will drive any innovation into that industry. So now because I pay the utilities, I want to make that as cheap as possible. Just like Grab, I want to reduce the cost of offering my service. So business model innovation, we invest in technology. We invest in new equipment. The air conditioning systems that we build and operate are the most efficient in the world. And it's not because we're trying to be good people, it's because it makes us more money. The business model aligns people, profit, and planet. And that's just been a business model innovation. They can be slightly better. But just like Grab, who have autonomous vehicles, and they have vehicles that can talk to each other, and they can tell each other what to do and how to operate, we did the same thing because we had scale. For the first time in our 60, 70-year history, we had scale. We owned assets around Southeast Asia. So we could therefore justify investing in artificial intelligence. We couldn't do that before. When we were the old Kaer, we were designing and building systems and giving them to our customers as products. We could not do this. Nothing changed. Our engineering team is the same. Our budgets are the same. Our people are the same. But we changed the business model, and it allowed us to therefore invest in this kind of stuff. And what does that mean? So this is our latest case study. And I just use this as an example of what the as-a-service business can unlock in terms of a circular economy. This is a site I chose. We tried to do it in the hardest site we could find. This is a business park in Pune, about 2 hours outside of Mumbai. It uses a huge amount of air conditioning because you can see the north plant is a shopping mall, but the south plant serves an automotive factory, office buildings, and an education complex. Huge consumers of air conditioning. So what we did is we offered air conditioning as a service. And we found the best way and the cheapest way to provide quality air conditioning for that premises. So we built a brand new air conditioning system. We made it as efficient as we possibly could. We applied artificial intelligence to bring down the consumption. And then we installed solar panels on the rooftop. Had nothing to do with sustainability. It was a business decision. We wanted reliable, cheap energy so we could run our air conditioning system. And the best way to do that was to put solar panels on the roof. And by matching those two things, a better level of service for your customer and a reducing of your cost, that plant is now 100% renewable. The air conditioning system for a business park in India is 100% solar powered, and in fact runs at a surplus, which can run about 50 houses in Singapore for a year, and it's water neutral as well. And the reason I show this as an example is because we didn't change as a company, we just changed what we did. We stopped selling products and we started selling services. And the as-a-service business model has been written up in climate change forums, in UN SDG forums, in sustainability forums, because of the business model. And so my point to you today is, it doesn't matter what the product is. It doesn't matter if it's in the built environment, it doesn't matter if it's in conference halls, whatever industry that you're in. If you are a business owner or a director of a business, you should immediately figure out a way how to servitize your business. We have lots of meetings in boardrooms about digitizing your business. You should talk about servitizing it. We are an air conditioning company. No one thought you could servitize that. If you can servitize air conditioning, you can servitize anything. Lifts, lights, solar. There's great examples in solar. So if you're a business owner, don't sell products anymore, sell services. Consumers will thank you for it, and they will give you their business. If you are a consumer, stop buying products. If you stop buying products, people will start selling you services, and the service level will be better, and the circular economy will take care of itself, because they will want to make more money, and they'll want to get more customers. This business model is disruptive inherently. It has disrupted every single industry it has gone into. So if you're in an industry that hasn't got this yet, either be disrupted by it or be the disruptor in it by doing it. Or very simply, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you remember nothing else from my presentation, buy milk, not cows. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Dave Mackerness. Thank you very much for your presentation.